So as Ross clocks off, we go right into our next presentation at 1 p.m. We're just a couple of minutes over time, and our next session is where we would have gotten in the vans and driven out to a few sites. And our tour leader for the rest of the afternoon is Nolan Brewer, who is a forester for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. And if I have Nolan's bio here or not. Oh, right here. So Nolan is a landowner assistance coordinator and also assists the state land staff with timber sales for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. His career in forestry and natural resources, especially early on, was primarily focused on fire management and fire operations, including time as a hotshot and smoke jumper with U.S. Forest Service, and later a fire unit manager for the DNR in Central Washington. Along the way, Nolan worked hard to develop a well-rounded perspective of forestry and forest management in both a professional and academic setting. In an effort to further develop these skills and abilities, he completed a master's degree at the University of Idaho in forest resources. So, Nolan, go ahead and take the mic whenever you're ready.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me all right, Andy?
Yep.
All right. Well, we got the goal of today in the afternoon, I think, well, one, we're standing kind of on the shoulders of a lot of giants here. It's really remarkable to have listened in for the past couple of days and just kind of be aware of everything that's going on from a broader scale. And I think with today's presentation, and I think Ross set us up really well, we're kind of getting down to that granular scale in terms of how we all fit this together and operationalize a lot of these plans that we're talking about and developing here. Shared stewardship, I'd say we're really kind of where the rubber hits the road here with this panel. So hopefully we're going to bounce around a little bit with the panel today. Short of a field trip, you got to listen to us drone on. We're going to interject some videos and tell some stories about just different projects that we have going on in the Central Washington area. And hopefully that'll round us out for the afternoon. But so with that, I'll go ahead and have the other panel members introduce themselves. Corinne, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, my name is Corinne Hoffman. I'm with the Chumstick Wildfire Stewardship Coalition that you just heard a little bit about from Ross Frank. I've been with the coalition for 3 years, and I've been in project management for about 15 in a completely different industry. And so here I am.
Great. All right. And then we have from NRCS, Chris Wright.
Yeah, I'm Chris Wright, and I'm with NRCS in the Wenatchee field office. And I'm the planner for Chelan County as part of the North Central team. And I was asked to be on this panel to kind of speak about some of the partnerships that we've had in the area and some of the work we've accomplished with everyone. So it was an exciting invite. Yeah,
great. And, before we get really going, I think it might be worthwhile, Chris, to, set the stage in terms of what our programs offer, and Corinne as well. We're all practitioners here on the ground with all slightly different flavors. So Chris, do you want to just kind of outline some of those things to set the stage for us?
Sure, I can speak on kind of what NRCS can offer. So we offer conservation planning for private landowners, and kind of our bread and butter in the area is through our environmental quality incentive program. And that's where we're able to create conservation plans for private landowners, small private forest landowners. and try to accomplish some of the objectives that they have for their property, whether that's non-commercial thinning, wildfire reduction, overall forest health improvements, wildlife improvements, some even water projects, salmon projects, and we're able to offer federal funding to help and address some of these problems on the landscape. And it's, as we'll talk about this afternoon, it's different than state funding or other local funding sources, both positive and negative, but we'll get into that in more detail later. But it's something where we do offer quite a bit of opportunity for the area. And so we're always trying to improve that, but it's an exciting opportunity for landowners in Chelan County.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll get into some of those differences a little later. Corinne, maybe just describe just a bit the Chumstick's role in this area.
Yeah, and so I know Ross talked about us a little bit, but we're a nonprofit, so different, obviously, than Chris or Nolan. Of Leavenworth, Washington, and we serve about 55,000 acres of private lands, and we've been doing that since 2008. Our mission here is to build a community, culture, and landscape adapted to wildfire. So we have a lot of difficulties, like Ross mentioned, with the apple maggot quarantine area, no mill. It's difficult to get rid of biomass. So that's where we step in and we help people with chipper programs. We have fuels reduction days. We help folks that can't get out to clear their own land by having work parties sometimes, obviously not during COVID, but, and we'll have a workshop with that, talking about fire risk around the home. We do fire assessments, both for forest and for structures. We work really closely with our partners, especially Chelan County. We're very grassroots, so that's really important to us. And like Ross said, what we like to see is work done on the ground, which I think all of us can agree with, but that's a real push for us, is getting that work done. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And Corinne, I don't know if it's just me, but just so you're aware, your audio's a little jumpy at times. So if that continues, maybe you can.
I'm on the phone too.
Okay. Oh.
To unmute my phone number, I could come in that way as well.
Yeah, we're able to capture it, I think, for now, but just so you're aware, I don't know if you can stop the video, it might be another option for you there, but we'll keep trucking here. And so I'll give just a little bit more insight into DNR's cost share program. I think most of the audience is probably aware of what we are and how we operate, but really briefly, you've heard from multiple DNR folks here today, all the way from, state forester, forest health and resiliency division staff. So DNR landowner assistance is more the local group. We're based out of Southeast region, at least here. We also have Northeast region foresters, which cover essentially Okanagan County and east of there. So I work for Southeast region, meaning that I report to that chain of command. But we work very closely with our forest health and resiliency division, obviously, to align ourselves with some of the planning efforts that they have. Our staff really did increase last year. We were able to essentially double our workforce, our foresters here in Chelan County, and same with Kittitas County. So we added 2 new foresters to those areas. And then the coordinator position that I fill, this has been new since 2019. So that's how long I've been in this current position here. In terms of our projects, which again, we'll probably touch on a little bit later, is, you know, the scale at which we operate, and Chris and Corinne, and I know Ross just set us up well for this, is a lot smaller than a lot of, you know, landscape scale treatments typically. You know, big project for DNR cost share is on the order of 50 to 100 acres at a time. And that's a really good project for us. Typically, we're in that 2 to 5 acre range, trying to cost share with landowners, provide them some technical forestry information at that scale, right? And I was going to pull up a map in a little bit, because what forester doesn't like to look at maps, right? But to kind of just show you guys the flavor of what that looks like across the areas that we work. And just to give you guys an idea, you know, as our staff really ramped up last year, I pulled some numbers from our files. We ran we set up 88 cost share projects last year for 978 acres. Not all of those were completed, but that's kind of the scale that we're operating at now with Cindy and Katie, our 2 foresters that we're doing. And then additionally, you know, in addition to cost share projects, we have an interagency agreement with Cascadia Conservation District. They're another excellent partner that we interface with on a regular basis here. Of course, you heard Patrick's on spring break this week with his family, so he wasn't able to make this panel. But and then in addition, we started doing fuels contracts where we're able to sort of, you know, bring landowners together, and then DNR Southeast Region would administer fuels reduction contracts at the scale of, you know, between that 50 and 100 acre mark. So again, with the added capacity of bringing another forester here, I think those sorts of things will become hopefully more commonplace for us here. And as I was talking to Chuck Hershey, I think it was 2 days ago, and it's been highlighted again and again, really the goal when you're working with private landowners, it's all about, as he said, winning hearts and minds, which I think is ultimately the challenge, right? And I know that we'll talk more about challenges here in a little bit, but so I hope that kind of fits, helps everyone see where we're going. Obviously, we align ourselves with the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy. I know Derek mentioned earlier today the statewide Forest Health Strategic Plan and the 10-year DNR Wildfire Strategic Plan. So obviously we're a part of some of those bigger planning efforts, as well as the regional and local efforts such as Chelan County CWPP and different things like that, which really kind of help give us all as a collective group of documents our marching orders and where we need to be focusing our attention. So it's also, I think, worth noting for me that all these strategic plans include an element of private lands and fire adapted communities or community resilience. And then in our wildfire response, where do we tend to always prioritize our firefighting resources? And that is on private lands for the most part, right? If there's the word that you'll hear thrown around is values at risk, and that is most commonly on those private lands, right? So anything that we can kind of do to preload those, to pre-treat those areas, the easier it makes our fire response, right? And then, you know, obviously along with that, almost every landowner that we contact, and Ross said this very well, they're one of their top priorities is wildfire management and how to you know, better protect their structures and their values on their landscape that they care about, in addition to wildlife and recreation, sustainable harvest, things like that. So really, you know, when we're thinking about working on private lands and shared stewardship there, that's kind of where we where we are and the purpose for us. I don't know, Chris or Corinne, if you guys had anything else you wanted to add to that, the purpose.
Okay, this should be better. I'm on my phone now. So we were talking about I missed a little bit because I was trying to figure that out, but we were talking about why from a landowner standpoint. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So, yeah. So for us, you know, and I'm just going to start off here, about 50% of our land, including the homes, are owned by people who have their full-time home elsewhere. So we've had to employ strategies to engage those landowners, regardless of where they live. Many of them are from the west side of the mountains, and they're not familiar with the dry forest ecosystems. Even people who have lived here for a long time, this is their normal, you know, this is what they're used to seeing. But faced with the reality of those wildfires that we keep seeing through the media every year, and we keep seeing in our own backyards in some cases, people are getting the picture that this ecosystem, this dry ecosystem, has different characteristics and actually needs management. And that can be very different than what they're used to. A lot of people, I think, don't think of the forest as something that needs to be managed unless you're a forester. So for us, what ends up happening is one of three things. These people, they'll often reach out to us and they'll ask for housing or forest assessments, and they're really eager to learn. The coalition reaches out to people, residents and non-residents alike, and offers some sort of help, be it cost share, chipping, educational workshops, something like that. We try to tailor to, we have the flexibility to tailor our program and to come up with different solutions, which is really helpful in getting some of this work out. Some people are not interested in conserving their lands or second homes, and they're not interested in this work, which is frustrating, especially for the folks who live here and may live right next to a hugely overstocked stand or something of that sort. So we try to help with that as well. We've definitely stepped in a couple of times when the next door homeowners were unresponsive, and every time so far we've had great results. So we just offer that help. The landowners that do want to manage their lands are varied, and they manage for different reasons, you know, but many have wildfire resistance or resilience on that ticket. Wildlife is another huge one. Privacy and beauty are all values that I see all the time with landowners. We also interact with the full spectrum of socioeconomic levels, and we really work to provide equitable forest restoration help and education, like I mentioned earlier, with some people who can't do that work themselves. So we try to take those barriers out of people's way and make the community as safe as possible. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, I don't know if you have anything additional to that.
Not additional. I'll reiterate what both of you said, you know, about every aspect from, you know, socioeconomic, you know, what they care about. But, you know, a few of the points to drive home are, we are dealing with a high preponderance of landowners that do not live on site. They're living on the west side. They're coming over for summer vacation, ski house, they just investment property. So that's a hurdle. And, you know, kind of NRCS's ways of connecting with landowners in this area has been either just word of mouth, you know, their neighbor's done it, their friend's neighbor did it, their friend did it, or it's a hand-me-down project from, you know, Chumstick, DNR, Cascadia, whomever, that they heard that there's an opportunity for some some planning help or some financial help. So those are our two real ways to obtain some participants, which is it's not unique, but it's kind of the only way we're able to survive in Chelan County because of the amount of federal land and, you know, the small amount of private land as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and the absentee landowner is a real thing. You know, how many people want to come over to their vacation house and do work on their week, or even worry about hiring a contractor to do work. And so that struggle is real. I kind of wanted to share a video next, sort of hopefully set the stage and give you an example of a really cool project. DNR and Cascadia and actually NRCS, we're all three involved with it, probably some different scales as a result of the 2016 Joint Chiefs project. And so I was going to share that video. I think it's about 5 minutes long. And then from there, that'll kind of hopefully queue up some more conversations for us. So bear with me while I do this. Let's see if this works.
I am Cindy Tenasket Ebel. I am a landowner assistance forester in Chelan and Douglas County. This project is locally referred to as River Road. We found a overstocked pine stand typical of this Lake Wenatchee and the drier areas. There are actually some sort of meadowy, grassy areas in this property also. The prescription for this was to remove the ground fuels, ladder fuels, and then do spacing of 8-inch and smaller trees.
My name is Patrick Haggerty. I work for Cascadia Conservation District, and I'm the Forestry Program Manager. Well, our role in this project was really in the project development and the outreach phase of the project. And so early on, when we had an opportunity to bring some Joint Chiefs funding to this part of the county, we looked for locations where there was private landowners adjacent to Forest Service projects, and we identified here about 32 landowners who all had 20 acres or 40 acres, and so we played the role of getting in touch with those folks and getting people engaged in the project. This project was unique. We took some new approaches that we haven't tried before in terms of outreach. We called it a pilot for good reason, because we tried some new things in terms of tiered approaches to how we were going to fund and challenge the landowners to work together. One of the ways we did that was challenging folks to reach out neighbor to neighbor. And if they got enough neighbors involved, we kind of had a threshold that they would get a higher and higher cost share reimbursement rate. And so that was a really effective tool here. I think we had 32 landowners in our project area that we identified, and about 27 or 28 of those folks had West Side addresses. And so we knew up front it was going to be a challenge to reach these individuals. People were excited, to have an opportunity to get, a high reimbursement rate for doing this work. This is a part of the county where people really recognize their risk. And there's real obvious signs of forest health issues along this road that people travel every day. We got a lot of pine beetle kill in here and other issues. So people were aware of the need, they're aware of their risk, and so they actually worked pretty hard. They put together a letter writing campaign where they wrote letters to their neighbors that they knew to try and get them involved and engaged.
My name's Jonathan Popovich, and I'm a landowner here in the River Road area. We participated in the 100-acre Healthy Woods Challenge over the last couple of years, actually, and it's been a big, with COVID coming along, we just sort of took on the opportunity to do it ourselves. We were all laid off here, so there's 4 of us that own the property together, so we spent our entire summer out here with chainsaws and ATVs and pulling logs out of the trees and doing a ton of chipping. It was quite an adventure. I grew up down in California and definitely have seen what fires have done down there, and the challenges that we face here is is that this hasn't been logged very effectively over the last 50 or 100 years. It hasn't burned at all. We've got a lot of built up brush, and it's really scary. I just built this house, and I, not only want to protect my investment, I want to help reduce my, homeowners insurance rates as well. It definitely helps. But also the local flora and fauna, it's really important to give them a healthy forest as well. When the forest gets so dense that the deer and the elk can't pass through, it really changes the feel of the land.
Some of the challenges to this project, and they're common to a lot of the work I do with landowners, is just getting the buy-in and finding people that want to participate. This project was fully funded by the DNR, so it was 100% paid for. I was the contract administrator, and even with that, we started out with 11 landowners, and one person just wasn't convinced that we would pay for the entire project, and so they didn't want to. They couldn't afford to have any money spent on it, so they dropped out, even though it was a 100% project. So the challenge is to just get people to buy in and actually do the work. The outcome of the project is a healthier forest, which in turn is more fire resilient and safer for the homes, the landowners, the community as a whole, safer. It's a spot where we could possibly, take some action if we had a fire.
My name is Nolan Brewer. I'm the Landowner Assistance Coordinator here in the area for Washington Department of Natural Resources. Our program's really designed to work with landowners, and our foresters provide that technical expertise when it comes to forest management. Really, the main themes we hear from landowners oftentimes is wildfires, how to make their areas and spaces more resilient to wildfire. One of the big things that I've really come to realize here is just the value of relationships, and that's relationships with partners such as Cascadia Conservation District, relationships with the landowners and working with them, fire districts, working with them. We're all working towards that common goal of, wildfire risk mitigation and forest health. Those things are out there that we're all kind of reaching for together.
All right, there's a little redundancy there, but I think that there's probably a lot of themes there that we've already talked about, that Ross has already been talked about, but yeah, hopefully that kind of helped. And oh, wait a minute, I was going to share my screen one more time and give you guys just a feel of where that was, because I think the other part of shared stewardship about, this story in particular, and in a lot of areas, like Chris said, we border this, our projects are going to border right up on Forest Service land, and that was essentially the case with this project. So I was going to do this really quickly here, make sure. So can folks see that map all right?
It's your desktop background.
Yeah.
Oh,
There we
There
go.
you
how
go.
about that?
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. So you can kind of see the green polygons here indicate the work that's actually been completed. And this is the area, for those familiar, Plain is right here. And you come down the Wenatchee River on this River Road project. So one of the things that was looking at as I pulled a parcel layer up here, this is all federal land here adjacent to a lot of this private land. So again, the Joint Chiefs project, I think, and I know the forest supervisor talked about it yesterday, but it really did kind of provide us this opportunity to bring continuity across, the Forest Service and onto private lands, which again, I think as we move forward, finding these opportunities to do this, it's definitely to our advantage. And I know that the Forest Service has been actively managing it on the Nattipock Ridge area here behind this community here with prescribed fire and potentially some other treatments. So anyway, I think that was kind of one more thing about this that I found really cool when we're putting this in the framing of shared stewardship. Yeah. And I see you, Chris, you mentioned nice VLAP picture. Yeah. That was Oregon last year. All right. So with that, Corinne, I know I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to talk about some other projects that really highlighted the shared stewardship concept. And Chris, same with you. Do you guys want to share on anything right now in our virtual field trip?
I was going to share on the Spromberg and the 123 project. Going back to that shared stewardship, to me it means that I've listened to my constituents, those grassroots folks that are on the ground. What do they need? What do they want? Also, though, we're a nonprofit, so we have to have funding somehow. And so we also have to listen very closely to our agencies that we work with, the different organizations that we work with. What are their goals? And how do our goals all cross-section together in the best way, right? To get the most work done, because that's what the steering committee wants, and that's what they're going to get. So for the Spromberg project, which Nolan, I don't know if you want to show where that is on the map or not, but either way, so it's a 50-acre project in Spromberg Canyon, and which is about 5 miles north of Leavenworth along the Chumstick Highway. So this was a couple of years ago when the DNR Forest Health Division was kicking off their All Lands grant program, which at the time was called the Cross Boundary Grant Program. And so their program was based on the 20-year strategic plan and the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy. So we were working really close with the Wenatchee River Ranger District, and they were looking to incorporate some of their previous work in the area with private landowner work. The local fire department was also interested in knocking back some vegetation on one of the north-facing slopes that is just super heavy as far as vegetation goes and could easily threaten Leavenworth in the event of a wildfire in that area. So we worked with all of these partners, the fuels manager at Wenatchee River Ranger District, Mike Barajas, and others. And we identified Spromberg Canyon as a prime location. It's a smaller canyon, so it was great for a pilot project for a small coalition like ours. And also the U.S. Forest Service had worked on 114 acres to the north and west within the last 5 years. So, that was appealing. Be doing some cross-boundary work, even though we're not crossing the boundary, but still reinforcing that work. Also, the areas within the high-risk rating for DNR, with DNR for wildfire. And also, there had been a fire at the mouth of the canyon, and it's a one-way in, one-way-out canyon, which had prompted FEMA grant. So it was bad enough for that. And that had been in the last 3 years. So the residents were really aware of their risk, and that is perfect. I'm sad they had the fire, but for something like this, it really gets people moving. So we started out with a goal of 50 acres, treating 50 acres, and we ended up treating those 50 acres with 8 very diverse landowners, some who had been born in that valley, some who worked for Microsoft, some who, just the whole, everyone was there, and all levels. So it was great. So the other thing is that this area is right across the ridge from Ross Frank's property, and he mentioned that spotted owl circle. So I ran into that issue, which not being a landowner and not being in an agency, the coalition has a really hard time knowing where those circles are. And so when we're picking project areas, we're kind of blind. And that's a tough place to be. Luckily, Richard Shellhouse, who is a retired U.S. Forest Service forester, was interested in the project, and he helped me learn how to do a northern spotted owl habitat survey. I also learned how to do a forest practices application, neither of which were written into the grant, but were necessary to be able to do this work. The project was completed last June, and a couple of the landowners are really interested in doing a prescribed burn from their land onto Forest Service land, just to give that extra layer of protection. So we're watching the growth on the masticated area, and we'll see when we can actually get that underway. Hopefully we can be a part of that as well. And then real quick, the 123 project is based on the Spromberg project, but it takes that shared stewardship several steps further, I really think. It was created collaboratively with DNR, Leavenworth Fire Department, and resident values in mind. And the goals are to treat 100 acres and include 20 landowners in 2 canyons, Eagle Creek and the Upper Chumstick areas. There's about 300 landowners between those. It's a rather complicated project, so let me know if I'm in the weeds. But it's a cost share program with a sliding scale of 50 to 85%, depending on how many acres will be treated and how many neighbors are working together, and whether they have a FPA or a Firewise designation. The 123 stands for folks who need differing treatments on their lands. One is for a group that will benefit from working with Nolan's office with landowner assistance. So we had to really work together to make sure that this project would work for landowner assistance and not step on any toes, not take projects away, but really emphasize both of our differing capacities between our organizations. So for folks that will benefit from that DNR cost share program, they will get 50% cost share from landowner assistance, but then they'll be eligible for up to another additional 35% cost share from the Chumstick Coalition if they qualify. Number 2 is for people that need work on my end, like a northern spotted owl habitat survey, a waterway removal, or some other type of assistance. And then 3 is for selective logging. So this is funded through DNR Forest Health, and they cannot pay for something where people are going to make money off of it, right? So we can't actually pay for the logging, but guiding folks to a forester is something that the coalition can do. And then we're offering a $900 reimbursement for the cost of that forester to help go through a thinning process. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, and Nolan was kind of the one that gave me the idea for that project. And I think it's really a good way to show how NGOs and government organizations and residents can work together. That'll be being kicked off shortly. And also one thing, we use the Chelan County Assessor's tax records to target those properties where folks live elsewhere. So everybody who owns a property out here will be contacted at least once, hopefully multiple times. We'd like to do a letter writing campaign like Patrick mentioned in that video on River Road. But we're just trying to get the most thorough treatment that we can on the ground. We'd like to see, and all of that land pretty much is bordered by Forest Service lands. So when the Chumstick to LP project comes down, that hopefully will make for some really good high quality cross-border treatment. So that's all I've got on that one. Thanks.
Awesome, Corinne. And you know, that tiered funding approach that you mentioned, that so the River Road project video was sort of the impetus for that. So we'll get to successes later, but you know, it's cool to see that, you know, these things that we're kind of coming up with and piloting, potentially gaining traction and providing pathways forward to landowners that, you know, may have financial barriers or otherwise. But yeah, and we're excited too to partner with you on Project 123. That's exciting.
Yay. It's going to be a good one.
I think so. Chris, do you have anything in the virtual presentation mode that you want to provide?
I'll try and throw out some different examples. I don't think we need to, I mean, you could throw the map up, I could, you know, kind of explain, but I'll try and differentiate a little bit here on some shared stewardship. And one example that it's pretty exciting is when a producer comes to Cascadia, for example, and tries to get a forest management plan written. You know, maybe they're going for tax reasons, but they're also getting a beneficial forest management plan written. And maybe Cascadia is able to offer them some, you know, high cost chipping near the house to reduce their fire risk, you know, in the short term. But, you know, more than a few times, they've also owned, you know, 20, 30, 40 acres of forest land up on the hill. And based off economy of scale, that just has not worked for Cascadia. And so we've been there to help scoop up that producer or that landowner and try to get them some NRCS financial assistance, which tends to pay on a better scale for a project, you know, a 20 to 50 acre project. And so we've had that happen multiple times, and it's been just a really good partnership because Patrick or another planner at Cascadia has already developed a really good relationship with that person and trust. And a big thing with working with private landowners, especially if they're in, you know, King County, is some sort of trust. And so that's been a really strong point, is working with Cascadia or, you know, another entity that's created a forest management plan and building off that. And kind of, you know, the economy of scale idea is we've had multiple landowners. You know, I can think of one off the top of my head up Mary Canyon, which is a little tributary to Chumstick. And he got I think a roughly 8 to 10 acre thinning project done with DNR one year. And he was able to jump at an opportunity. He didn't know about NRCS. This was, you know, a handful of years ago. But through word of mouth, through DNR, he had other forest stands that needed treatment in the next few years. And he put in an application with NRCS, and, you know, it took a couple of years of funding. We'll hit on that point here in a minute. It took a couple of years to get that application funded into a contract, but we were able to address 20 acres of thinning in 3 different forest stands to build upon that DNR work that he had accomplished. So I think that's another great example of shared stewardship amongst our different organizations here in the area. And it's not any different than any other county in the state. It's just, you know, we're in a little slightly different area here. You know, what we've been hitting on, our landowner base and our land base here makes for some exciting challenges.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was hoping we were going to get to here. So excellent job sort of queuing that up for us, Chris. But, you know, I think Commissioner Boogert said it earlier, you know, the Wildfire Ready Neighbors program that is just kicking off here in the county, you know, I could see that really kind of tying back into our shared stewardship conversation as well, right? Like landowners getting connected with their fire districts. Then the fire districts are then able to feed those you know, people who have the acres back into our programs, right? In terms of NRCS and the EQIP program, Chumstick or you know, DNR cost share. So, you know, one of the things that I wanted to, you know, as we're talking through challenges, right? Like, there's a lot going on in this county, and at the end of the day, it can be confusing for landowners or us practitioners to be aware of all that that we have going on, right? So really trying to best serve our landowner base is going to be our struggle, and it has been. I think we're getting better in terms of knowing what, you know, NRCS has or DNR has, especially as new things are coming out or Cascadia has. So I think just identifying that, you know, one of the things that we were doing pre-COVID was something called Breakfast Club, which, you know, a group of us would get together monthly to try to wrap our heads around these issues and talk. Look, I know I miss it, but trying to think locally about making sure we were staying on the same page and we were all aware of each other's programs, right? Because it can get out of hand fast. And then what ends up happening, you know, landowner equitability was mentioned by Corinne earlier, but, you know, those landowners are ending up hearing about a program secondhand potentially that is funding something at a different rate. And you know, as a practitioner, we may or may not know about that, right? And so those are kind of the things we got to watch out for as we're all kind of working towards these goals, right? That, you know, we're not hanging each other out to dry, so to speak, but I think we're getting better at that, but it is out there as a potential challenge for us, so.
Yeah, definitely. Those duplicative efforts also can kind of, you know, we were doing a chipping program and then Cascadia is doing a chipping program, and Wenatchee Fire, Lake Wenatchee Fire and Rescue is doing a chipping program. And I was like, you know what, why doesn't the coalition focus on something different, you know? And we still do we call it woody debris recycling days. So we still do a chipping program, but we don't do the roving chipper because it takes up so much of my time. So it's all about capacity and knowing, you know, that program is still out there and it's still available to folks. But instead, we're going to do these bigger projects that hopefully will treat like a whole area. So not duplicating efforts, but inspiring more work to be done, more different kinds of work, and to do it together, kind of in a cohesive way, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, did you want to talk about some of the differences of programs as it relates to challenges, or were you going to save that for later?
Sure, we could get into that right now if you would like. So I kind of hinted at it a minute ago with, you know, funding, and with our funding sources being, you know, large nationwide funding from USDA, it's never, there's never a guarantee as far as how much money we're going to get nationwide, how much money we're going to get in the state, and then how much money of that state money is going to be allocated to our area or to forestry, you know, the statewide forestry program. So with that being said, you know, if we get, you know, applications in the door every year, we never, and, you know, based off the size of the application, we never know how they're going to do. They have to compete with other applications, not only within our area, but oftentimes they're competing with other forestry applications in, you know, Grays Harbor County or Whatcom County sometimes for funding. So no matter how optimistic we are about a project just being great and solving a lot of landowner objectives and objectives for NRCS, we really can't guarantee anything. And so that leads us to oftentimes not being able to fund an application right away or even in a couple years. And so that requires us to keep the lines of communication open with these landowners to know that they have not dropped off the earth with us, and that we still care about them and we still want to get that project funded, but we're waiting. And I know DNR has, you know, a little bit of this. They're on a slightly different funding cycle, but sometimes they're able to maybe jump at a funding source a little quicker than we are. And so a lot of the communication with landowners is trying to relate some of the opportunities of funding between the different agencies and the different resources that we have here in the county, and trying to not confuse them or not pawn them off on somebody else. We're trying to get the project done at whatever means possible. And, they are our client per se. So we're not trying to, we're trying to help them. We're not trying to kick them out the door, but we're also trying to help them and get that project paid for no matter what funding source it is. So, year to year, the lack of funding can really create some challenges for us in getting these projects going, I think.
Yeah, and that I think is shared between agencies as well. Some of those challenges for us is, working on our state capital funding at a biennium basis and trying to meet the objectives of the 20-year strategic plan. The legislature, we don't see that funding until maybe 6, even 8 months into that new biennium. And then we have 14 months of that 2 years to try to get as much done as we can, right? And now we're up against it right now, like trying to spend out as much as we can prior to that June 30th biennium ending, right? And trying to make sure that we're doing that. And that's a vicious cycle. I'm trying to get ahead of that. I think with some added staff, we're starting to get a little better. And then as well, managing some of those federal grants that we're getting as well to make sure that we're meeting those as well, timelines there. Ross kind of set us up perfectly, as did Corinne. I'll switch gears just a little bit in terms of challenges. Some of the forest practices struggles, are very real for us. Even in what I would call non-commercial ventures. And for example, we had a larger project lined up in north of Fish Lake in that Pole Valley community. There's one small section of private land there. We had it all set up. Well, come to find out, there was some deep-seated landslide issues that automatically tripped that into a Class 1 special forest practices activity. That, I'm glad we were able to get the forest practices forester out there soon enough to recognize that, but that set that project back quite a bit, right? And in terms of getting grant funding allocated to a project and then realizing the scope of that project is going to have to shrink significantly because of the forest practices concerns in that area. And that's a real barrier for all of us in the private land side of things. Especially if they're not taking commercial trees off, how's a small landowner supposed to even be aware of that? So Ross and Nance, if you're still on, and I think you are, but one thing that we've sort of come up with, which I'm more than happy to share with, the group or anyone that's interested, is a forest practices screening tool that I really think is going to help us sort of identify those things as we're pulling projects together to make it so we're not, catching landowners or even our own programs off guard by, all of a sudden, finding you're in violation of that. So hopefully, as we start to implement that, we won't run into those issues. But owl circles are real, and how we're working around those can be challenging, to say the least. I don't know if you guys want to say any more about forest practices.
It added an extra year to the Spromberg project. So between the FPA, the waterway removals, which to be fair, I all about waterways, all about aquatics, love, like that was where I was first going when I decided to change my career. But when it's just a kind of not even a gully, but a ditch that comes down a mountain that runs when the snow melt's happening and doesn't even really run then, it just doesn't make sense. And that's one of the reasons that in that 1, 2, 3 project, rather than not having that funding set aside for those activities, doing the habitat survey, doing the waterway removal if needed, that kind of work, being able to help out with that landslide situation, which I hear there may be some up, up in Little Chumstick. So that's definitely a lesson learned for the Chumstick Coalition, and something that we're able to address going forward, which I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on a regulatory basis, we have the same owl circle issue. The good thing, it has not stopped any of our projects, but it has delayed them a year, one of them even 2 years, and it has changed up, some timing and some tools that they were able to use as far as noise and when they were able to do the implementation. As a federal agency, the other issue we oftentimes run into is some cultural resource slowdowns. And usually that's only if the landowner is going to be burning some slash material following the project. That's usually the only cultural resource hangup we have. And we've gotten pretty good at communicating that with the landowner and with our cultural resource staff during the planning process, so that we can jump on that as soon as possible. But yeah, owls is our big one. In a few of those tributaries to Chumstick for sure have a lot of circles on them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I see Chris's comment in the chat too, about the coordinated visits. Absolutely, that's something that we need to be looking at. And I'm hopeful that our screening tool will get us there for, the vast majority of our landowners, but there's absolutely going to be time and place for when we want to be looking at that site visit. And again, that was kind of what we employed in our site visit for that community I was referring to, because we were concerned about it, and come to find out, it validated what we were concerned about in terms of some deep-seated landslide stuff. Right.
One other, if I may, issue that I've had with as far as challenges go is we work in mountains. I work in pretty much in mountains. So those canyon walls can be super steep, and especially the north-facing ones are just, you are climbing through, up a mountain, basically, through brush and woods and stuff. And I'm sure we've all been there. But finding a crew to go in and do that work by hand can be very tough. And for the Spromberg project in particular, we worked with Connor Craig. He's a local contractor, and he was able to bring in a crew that it just sounded like there was a huge hive of bees on the mountainside with their chainsaws. And I was just so grateful that those guys would come up and do that just tough work. And it was hot. So finding those crews is a big deal, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, that's one of my other things I had on my list here too, was just, I know, and this isn't just related to that project, but contractor availability can be a major barrier for our landowners getting work done. I think we're starting to see more contractors coming online, but the other side of that too, and not just the contractor availability, but consulting foresters as well, for landowners that are looking to do projects that are going to involve some element of commercial. Most of the time they aren't going to have the skills and abilities to walk through a forest practices application, right? And you mentioned it, Corinne, in our neck of the woods, Richard is retired. So who are we now leaning on in that consulting forester community? I know Brian's on the call still, but AFM's been great. They've really helped kind of fill that for us. But I'm sure they have multiple irons in the fire as well. And I don't think this is a problem that is exclusive to us here in Central Washington either. It can be a difficult thing for us all. So that challenge is out there. Yeah. One other thing that I think, I don't know if Corinne, you or Chris necessarily deal with, that I was thinking about in terms of challenges is, what do we do with our landowners that are in the sage steppe environment and not necessarily a true forested environment? I realize we're at an SAF conference now and having this conversation, but how can we best serve those individuals and landowners in that environment?
That's a tough one.
I'm not a range specialist.
Neither am I. And, I did, my husband and I went and lived out at the Moses Coulee. So the Nature Conservancy owns 30,000 acres between the Moses Coulee and BB Hills. And so we went and we lived out there for about a year and never lived in that environment before. And it was a challenge, and protecting rangeland. I honestly am following, there's so Washington Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network is doing a shrub steppe series on how to conserve and how to reestablish that kind of environment, which is really cool. So I suggest everybody checks it out. Pretty neat.
Yeah, I don't know if NRCS has programs available, Chris, or expertise there.
Well, in the ways that we do things here in the Western world, this year we have a dedicated funding source to rehab after the large wildfires in Douglas County and Okanagan County last year. In that sage steppe rangeland / cropland area. But there has been a bigger push, and I know you, Nolan, have been one of these people trying to spearhead it with a fuel management, fuel break, rangeland ecology, rangeland health aspect look at our area to see if we can better control these range fires that are happening every year, every other year. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they are, going through that ponderosa pine, sagebrush, bitterbrush landscape and completely, running wild. And so there is a bigger push just because people are seeing it every year. So I envision something's going to happen where we're going to be getting dedicated funds to address, forest / range health communities at NRCS. I see it happening just because there has been a lot of eyes on that problem, not only just locally anymore. It's a big deal. It's going to happen.
Good.
Yeah, that's great to hear about. I just know we see it all the time. Fire transitioning from the sage steppe up mm-hmm. into the high country, or vice versa. Realize maybe not in the Chumstick, but certainly not too far away from that's occurring. One thing too, is you guys probably noticed on the map, I was hoping that Connor Craig, that the contractor that Corinne mentioned, was going to make it on here, but sort of the size and scale of projects can make it a challenge for landowners, especially when they're trying to, oh great, Connor just texted me. He said he's listening in. We'll see if we can't unmute him, but contractors have a hard time making it pencil out for themselves on a smaller mm-hmm. project, just because move-in costs are so high that for them to tackle 2 or 3 acres, that can present mm-hmm. challenges as well. Ultimately, that barrier exists where that landowner may not be able to absorb that higher cost rate to get that project done. Also, as mentioned, just the steepness of the ground, which we have here in Central Washington, can really drive costs up in a hurry. And then, as we start to get into more of that kind of 6 to 8 inch DBH range, and the trees are, 40 feet tall, yeah, that's still a cost share project, but boy, that's a ton of biomass to be chipping, domesticating, or things like that. So I don't know if you guys have any, you guys probably run into those same issues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What do you do with the biomass afterwards? And that, you know, just echoes what Ross was saying, especially up here with our, you know, the apple maggot quarantine runs right down the middle of the Chumstick Highway, which doesn't make any sense if we know how you know, things move, especially insects. A highway is not going to stop them. But we can remove stuff from the, what is it, the south or the east side of the highway, but not from the west side of the highway where Ross's property is, for example. So yeah, what do you do? I don't, it's an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing issue. Yeah.
To get back on your point about contractors and work crews, and I brought up that Mary Canyon project earlier, and as an example, that landowner, it could have been Richard Shellhouse. We keep saying his name. He may have been the consulting forester on that. And I believe he used a crew from down in the Yakima Valley to do the handwork. And those guys would come up, stay in a hotel or motel in Leavenworth and work, you know, for a week and bust their butts on steep Chelan County slopes, trying to cut trees down, cut them up into length size so that, you know, they can put them in brush piles or do what they had to do to get ground contact. But that's how far he had to go to get a crew. And now he did trust that crew. So maybe he did overlook some other local people, but you can't blame him for that. I know that that same crew has worked up in, you know, done tree plantings up in Okanagan County. So that's, you know, that is a huge problem, is finding people willing to do the work for a cost that is somewhat close to what we can help pay for, just because the remoteness of the area at times, and just the difficulty, the steepness, the number of trees per acre, how much needs to get brought down to the ground. You know, it's tough work. So that is a challenge we face as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the Spromberg project was the same crew. That Connor actually was the contact that brought them up that time. So great guys. And that Forest Service project that was behind Spromberg, the 144 acres, they brought those guys up from Oregon. As far as I know, there's nothing like that in this area at all. So it'd be nice if there was.
What's funny is I spent some time this fall out in northeast Minnesota, and the Forest Service was doing a huge thinning project out there. And one day they had 2 white vans of crews from Oregon come out. They were contracted thinning crews from Oregon, and they bid on the project in northeast Minnesota. So it really made me rethink Chelan County complaining about people coming from Prosser. You know, so interesting.
Nolan, are we still on the lessons learned one?
I think so. It's going to move us there for sure. I think we've already heard about the lack of mill infrastructure enough. I don't think I need to hit on that point, but yeah,
I think we know about that.
I think we could move into that lessons learned.
So we have, we had a project up here that was called the Nighthawk Ridge Lane project. It's up just to the west of Leavenworth, and it's one of the big hills that you see across the Wenatchee when you're looking in that direction towards Wenatchee. And so it's up on Mountain Home, which isn't really like, it's adjacent to where we usually work, but it's not exactly where we usually work. In any case, we had 12 landowners who represented about 320 acres up there, and they wanted to do some Firewise work. They wanted to be a Firewise community. And Nolan and Cindy had been working with them and then referred them to the Chumstick Coalition. So I ended up making a wildfire risk assessment for that community. Patrick Haggerty from Cascadia was involved, as well as Ben Carlson, who is a forester from the west side, from the Lake Tapps area, was with us to work on that. And it ended up that they didn't become a community, a Firewise community, and we didn't do any after a couple of community meetings, and you put a couple months into this thing, and then nothing happens, except that I went up there later in the year and the next spring, and at least 6 of those properties were either being thinned commercially, or they were having fuels reduction done on them. And Nolan, I don't know if your office ended up doing some of that work or not, but just seeing that those folks were indeed, quite a few of them, doing the work was really great. That was really heartening to be like, okay, I just put in all this work. Well, what happened is those people realized how at risk they were. And so even though I didn't get to help them directly do that work, I was really happy to see that that effort that we put in produced something. So as long as you get the work done, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we did end up cost sharing some of those projects up there, and I believe AFM was involved in some of the commercial harvest up there as well. So yeah, it's coming together. And I love seeing that too, because I know you guys you guys spent a bunch of time up there getting that community engaged. It's funny, the question was brought up, I think it was in a couple sessions ago on shared stewardship, about how does someone or a community go about, getting these groups, fire adapted communities assembled. And really, I know that it's been hit a couple times, but those relationships just are so key in it. I realize that's kind of a soft skill for us all, talking to a group of foresters here, but man, it really does matter for us all that we're connected like that. And that includes that trust that we have with those private landowners between our agencies, and then those newer partners, and that sort of momentum sort of carries itself forward. At least I've found it in Chelan and Kittitas counties to kind of get us over that hill, so to speak. And that was the other thing was the partnerships.
So I was just going to mention the Chumstick Coalition was one of the founding members for the Washington Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, which is actually how I met Nolan and a whole bunch of other folks around the area and around Washington. And that has been just hugely helpful to see what other people are doing with their programs. I've taught a couple of different times with them or given presentations, and it's really a learning network. Everybody is expected to participate in both learning and sharing of knowledge. But they're doing some really great things. There's a lot of, like I mentioned, that sage shrub step class that's happening. There's all kinds of things to be learned from that network. And I just really have to say, if it wasn't for them when I came into the Chumstick Coalition, I don't know what I would have done. They were amazing. The other one that's kind of high level is the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative. And I'm sure that many of you are really familiar with their work. And the coalition just finished up a draft form of a document that is basically a collaborative framework for that, for the North Central to work with the Forest Service, in particular the Okanagan Wenatchee So I know Lloyd McGee was on the call. He was involved in that. Patrick Haggerty, and then also Sam Israel from the Methow Citizens Council. And basically what that does is, well, backing up, I don't know if a few of you know about different times when maybe the Forest Service and partners didn't quite communicate like well. I don't know. Anyway, I think that some of us can think of those times, but this is basically meant to agree to a certain number of touch points along a project's lifetime, and also to, if there's turnover in employees or a different contractor comes on or whatever, we can give them this document, say, hey, this is where we're at. This is what was agreed to. Do we need to amend it? Does this work? And then the Forest Service doesn't get multiple touch points from all of our members, hopefully, that's the idea. And they're able to do their work. And then we have times when we'll come together and answer questions and make sure we're still all on track with something. So that's some really exciting stuff. And actually, they're probably presenting on it right now because they're having their steering committee meeting right now. But I'm happy to be here doing this. This is great.
Yeah.
So those are my high-level partners, Nolan.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think that really does go to show sort of the interconnectivity of all of this shared stewardship stuff, right? Things happening at higher levels all the way down to, you and I and Chris and Connor talking amongst ourselves at the granular level to like put these projects into action, right? And the other thing I'll say is a little bit of wildfire along the way never hurt, generating some public buzz as well. So striking when the iron is hot is always good too, right? Like we see our numbers go up and our requests go up after a busy fire season. So yeah, it's just the reality of working in our professions, I think. So anyway, I know we identified tons of challenges, right? But do you guys have any successes that come to mind, or some of the ways you turn some of those challenges into successes that immediately come to mind?
Well, I think any successful, partnership I've had with the landowner or with the forester and a landowner is when the lines of communication are open from the time of initial interest or application until the final certification, payment, handshake, what have you at the end. And I think that takes a lot of trust on all the parties involved, especially with the way, our financial assistance is pushed out, whereas the participants not paid anything until that project is done, certified to meet specifications, and that they're good to go. So they've sunk a lot of their own money or labor or time or what have you into that project, and they're trusting in an NRCS planner or a DNR planner to guarantee that, to ensure that they're going to be given that contracted amount upon completion and certification. So I really do have to reset my thinking every now and then that is putting a lot of trust in that relationship. So you need to have a lot of open communication. And I think oftentimes it's between, myself or another planner and the contract holder, the landowner, the participant, but also maybe their go-to person, their forester, their contractor who's trying to do that work to meet those specifications. So I think doing that from start to finish, and you're going to hit speed bumps, you're going to hit times when someone's away on vacation and not communicating as quickly as someone would like, or someone's waiting for an answer and they don't have it. But I think they need to be receptive. They need to be open. And I think we need to be understanding of landowners, and landowners need to be understanding of us as well, that we're trying to get the right thing done, and that patience will pay off, but we need to just be open and kind of explain what we're doing, because it can take a while and it can involve a lot of dollars. So it is I can see it as a scary thing for some people.
Yeah, again, I'll come back to, where DNR has been, and we share that exact same sentiment. The biggest thing that hurts us is public losing faith in our program and ability to handle even things as simple as just reaching out, right? So that definitely is. I think DNR has historically been in the past of all hands on deck during wildfire season, and again, we're really attempting to change that approach in our landowner assistance shop, and making sure, and we do now have a plan for full-time coverage in the counties here locally that I'm involved with, to make sure that there's a forester, or at very least someone who's going to answer the phone, so those landowners are caught back up, because that's been recognized for sure at the local level. So, I think the other, I kind of talked about some of my talking points here. The other thing I was thinking, I think this might have been Corinne's idea that I'm stealing, is just taking advantage of federal, state planning efforts at the local level, and that includes things like field trips. Anything that we can do. I think there was a ton of interest in the River Road project, and getting out there with Mike Barajas and the Wenatchee River staff, to sort of leverage some of their efforts to engage with private landowners. I think those are the sorts of things, as we move into the future. Hopefully we can continue to take advantage of those field trips or tours, or just marketing campaigns like Wildfire Ready Neighbors, to serve all of our best interests for our agencies and entities. But I know that's something that I feel like every time we're doing that, we're seeing that as a force multiplier, not necessarily us trying to just go do it all on our own kind of deal.
Yeah, that resonates with some other work that I'm doing with Forest Health. I'm sure that you're all aware that the Chumstick to LT landscape assessments just came out, and Chuck Hersey and Garrett Mears did a explanation for those of us in the industry regarding their results. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, I think that some of our community leaders around here really need to know about this. And not just about the really high level scientific part of it, although that is huge and a big part of it, and we need that included. But I don't want to get those folks really, bogged down, because that's not what they do. So what we're looking to do is to do a virtual community meeting, and basically the coalition will talk about DNR, and the coalition will talk about what we've done in the last year, what is happening now. Then we'll talk about that landscape evaluation, what it means for our area. And then we'll talk about the 1-2-3 project, and invite neighborhoods, because this whole area is in a DNR high risk, assessed area, to, if they can get their neighbors or a certain number of acres online for a project like this, let us know. I'd love to front load projects. Holy cow, that would make my job so much easier. So just thinking like that, and using those opportunities that come along when DNR is like, I have this great assessment, and it shows, wildfire risk to houses. It shows wildfire risk to the forest and, other metrics that people care about. They don't want their land to end up looking like, up the Eniat, the Tyee fire of '94. They want to protect those values. And so we're putting that together as well. And I think that that's going to be really great for our community. And we're going to try to involve everyone and it's going to end with a brief Chumstick to LP project, just to touch on it, because that's years out and it's also not my baby. It's not DNR's, So I'm going to try to get I'll get somebody from the Forest Service to help us with that. But just showing what we're all doing in the area briefly, those kinds of things. I really think when you talk about these relationships, and these are the relationships that we need to have, so yeah.
Yeah, and that, I had it up as one of my thoughts, but it's sometimes what I hear from landowners is why should I do anything on my 2 acres when the Forest Service isn't, managing their lands right across the fence, right? So then we're taking that and saying they are going to do something, right? Like, and having their staff help lay that out. I think that really does go a long way in being like, okay, we're all adopting that all hands, all lands partnership across the landscape. So didn't want to cut anybody short, but from my end, I didn't really have anything else prepared. I see we still have about a half hour of time, but Chris or Corinne, did you guys want to chime in with anything?
Yeah, I had another point here written down, and it kind of goes to the idea of working with people that don't live here, that maybe live out of state or live on the west side. And I guess it's something that we can take from our COVID time here is we all love these Zoom meetings and team meetings with our hearts, but I think I've taken the opportunity to meet with, a landowner in Bellevue with his forester in Spokane over a Teams call. And, I've never met them face to face in person before, but, we were able to meet over Teams call, put some faces to names and have a nice discussion about what their objectives are and, go that way. And then next time he's able to make it over the mountains, we are able to kind of hit the road running on his plan. And so I think maybe that even though we really dislike them compared to the in-person meetings, it does offer an added benefit over just a simple phone conversation. I think it is better. So take it for what it's worth, but I do think there is an opportunity there, even when life returns to normal, to use this technology that we've all come very familiar with and comfortable with in the years to come for our circumstance we have here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Zoom has really leveled the playing field as far as people being near or far. I'm sure that we're all spread all over Washington right now, maybe elsewhere. It's great. I'd much rather be in the forest with all of you, but we do what we can. But for outreach, it's really valuable. I agree. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I wish we were out in the field right now talking about this rather than on the Zoom call, but I think that's all. Like I said, that we had Andy. I don't know if you want to take anything, or I see we've got some stuff in the chat maybe we can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do the stuff in the chat, and then let's invite people to submit more questions. I know I have a couple of questions too. So I will read them, I guess. Let me see where we left off with Ross. Okay. Well, first off, Ross Frank, who took us on the Red Tail Canyon Farm tour, said to pass along congratulations on these projects. These are cutting edge and hopefully the first of many more. Kudos to the Chumstick Wildfire Stewardship Coalition, DNR, and Cascadia. So well done. I have a question about that because Corinne talked about like 50% of the funds could come from DNR, and then the other 35% would come from the coalition, or maybe that was you, Nolan, that said that. And then Cascadia had funds. I'm having trouble following the money because as far as I know, like Corinne doesn't generate money. She gets money and then uses it to pay for things, right? So
yes.
Can you explain how these creative ideas were managed so that we can have other people that are attending kind of be able to gin up some of their own strategies?
Yeah. So for the 1-2-3 project, really it was, okay, Spromberg is starting, this is happening, but I want to do something more. I don't want to be the person who's hiring a contractor. I'll put out a contractor list and a list of foresters, but I really want people to be involved in these projects. It's their land. They need to be involved in the stewardship of it. I want them to feel ownership because it is their land. And as far as how we thought about doing that, the 1, 2, and 3, Nolan and I were having a taco and a beer at the convention, the WSSAF convention, and kind of just started talking about this. And basically, I wanted to make sure, I had heard that other projects had a negative impact on landowner assistance because people were like, well, I want 100% cost share. I want this. And I felt like the Spromberg project might have been adding to that problem or that challenge. And so I wanted to make sure that our projects going forward didn't do that and worked with landowners' assistance. So we really thought about how to do that. And so we broke it out. What does landowner assistance do that the Chumstick Coalition doesn't want to do? I don't want to have to go back out and deal with people doing the work themselves, for example. That's not something that's going to be a part of the number 2 in the 1-2-3 project. But I do want to make sure that those people who want to do the work themselves can still participate. That's where Nolan and Cindy and Katie all come in, and they're able to manage those properties. And they, of course, are only doing up to 50% cost share. But we also want those people to work with their neighbors. We want them to do as much work as they can. So let's add on those incentives for getting your neighbor on board with an additional 25 or 35% cost share. And that really, I think, elevates landowner assistance's program as well as serves the purpose of getting more land treated. And then we also wanted to be able to have logging be a part of this because let's face it, these canyons up here really need some serious treatment. A lot of the areas do. So how do we get that into the project? And that's been a conversation of how do we stimulate logging on small, like pieces of land. That's hard to do. But rather than going to a logger and saying, hey, I have a couple acres that need to be logged, I can say, okay, everybody decided to go with, one group is probably going to go with the same logger, same forester. Let's see if we can get 20 3-acre parcels, and that might be a pain for the logger to move their equipment so many times, but they're still not coming over for just 3 acres. So that is really what I was trying to address a couple of the points that I was trying to address, and just get this work done, and make sure that it benefits not only the coalition, but landowner assistance and our local contractors and foresters, if we have any, and build that capacity. And I want to do it next year too. So we'll see. And maybe next year I'll have projects ready to go. That'd be awesome. So we'll see.
Yeah. To tag on to that, Andy, you know, our grants are pretty specific in terms of, you know, if it's federal funding through NFP or Western states versus our state capital funding sources. What's not specific is where that match needs to come from for those federal grants. And so as we're working together and you know, with Forest Health and Resiliency Division, you know, matching state and federal funds to make that project whole, you know, that's something that we've all agreed on, that it's an acceptable operation, right? And that could change as we move forward. I don't anticipate it changing, but, you know, we were able to sort of cross that hurdle and get everybody on board with that. So we're able to bring in, you know, 50% from this funding source. So it is a colors of money game, unfortunately. And that I'm finding that really does matter. And, you know, especially when you're coming down the grant cycles ending, that can be a real challenge. But in this case, it's worked out to where we're able to match like that and get the landowner a better product. And like Corinne said, she can be out there pitching DNR cost share program, and our foresters can be out there pitching project 1, 2, 3. So all of a sudden, rather than just one person, you now have 4 or 5 people interacting in the Chumstick Canyon saying, hey, talk to these guys, let's build that momentum, you know, so we can provide those services on a broader scale and a pace that, you know, and a scale that, you know, hopefully moves the needle on if and when the fire comes through the Chumstick, right?
Thank you, that helped. Next up, do you use FPAMT? I guess that's the FPAR's new acronym.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, that's where we go. We also have cultural specialists reviewing that as well as part of our screening tool. We have cultural concerns as well, even if it's just driving masticators on lands there. So we need to make sure that we're checking those boxes before we allocate funds to a project. So that's part of the screening tool, in addition to I can't even remember the acronym, the forest practices site.
Right. Okay. And this is kind of along those same lines. Chris from Alaska said Ross brought this issue up during his lunchtime tour of the tree farm. He suggested coordinated visits by the Stewardship and forest practices foresters to help with coordination of objectives. And I know that a while ago, there was actually, in order to access cost share funds, you had to have a forest stewardship plan. And that in itself required a cultural resources, an endangered species, checking on streams and unstable slopes and things as part of your management plan. And that's not required now. And in my opinion, it more has gotten done as a result of not having a plan be part of the deal, as much as I believe in planning. So I don't know if you want to, you've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, it does open the program up, right? There's issues there, and that is the impetus behind the screening tool that we've sort of come up with here in Southeast region. And keep in mind too, when I'm talking about it, I definitely have a small view of things here in Southeast region. There's a whole other region out there that serves a ton of landowners in Northeast region, and they're going to have perhaps a little different view than what we've come up with. So, I think aligning our two regions in the east side of Washington, that's been a goal of ours and Forest Health Division for a while now, and we're getting there. I just want to bring it up with this audience that there might be some differences there. But yeah, hopefully that helps, right? I think we need to be addressing those cultural issues in a real way.
You bet. That screening tool sounds helpful.
Yeah.
Pete Weir, silviculturist at the Forest Service, said that they hire numerous contractors for small thinning, pruning, hand piling projects throughout the work season, combining private land project parcels to create a larger blocks of work can help. And I thought that's a pretty good idea if we can coordinate that stuff. The reality would be you'd have to pay about the same as what they pay in order to keep the people there or more, unless they just didn't have any other choice of work and they're already there. But can you imagine going from $1,000 an acre to, I don't know what Forest Service pays for their rates. That's curious.
And the coordination is just the big thing there, is the timing. Having some of our projects be ready, on the shelf, ready to go when that Forest Service crew, or contractors in the area that's going to be the hurdle. And so it's going to be knowing when they're going to be doing their project, what year, what area, what month, and then hopefully having our projects ready. That's going to be the main hurdle that we'd have to get through there.
Yeah, DNR could be a little bit more expedient, I'm sure.
We're still going to run into the same issues, I think, as Chris. Just at our basic level, our landowners are responsible for selecting their contractors, not us. But if we know that a Forest Service contracted crew is working in the area for the summer, that's good information for us to have, because we can pass that to the landowners in that area too, and say, hey, here's another on top of the list that we already provide you. Here's another potential source. And then in terms of the funding question, I've found it to be a pretty big discrepancy between what federal lands cost versus private lands. I think a lot of that is just due to scale, but I also think there's a certain element of working on and around private homes that drives the cost up more than just, say, whip felling out on the back 40 for Forest Service contracts, right? So our costs on average are around at the low end $1,200 an acre for what I would consider PCT, in this county, and in Kittitas County, that's on the low end, right? So I don't know. I don't have real good scale on where the federal contracts are, but that's oftentimes what we're hearing from our contracting community.
Is that when you say PCT for $1,200? That's just the thinning? Then that's no removal of the slash or anything?
No, all the way through brush disposal.
Okay.
So either chip, masticating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what it costs to fight fire on a acre of land near a home these days? Just out of curiosity. I'm sure there's a range that people throw around.
I didn't look in the 20-year strategic plan for that, but I guarantee you it's over $10,000 an acre.
Depends how expensive that house is, I guess.
Pete made a comment, might be smoothest to have a separate agreements with contractor, private and contractor USFS. Most of the Forest Service contracts will be awarded by mid-May across Oregon and Washington. Opportunity to share contacts about who's working nearby sooner than later. Yeah, so there is opportunity for sure to share the contacts. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I like that. And then, you know, as I said before, I think I'm presently aware of like 3 of our, I'll call them fuels contracts on the order of like 50 to 100 acres. But, you know, if they go through an RFQ process, like I'm sure many of the federal contracts do, and get that to select a successful bidder for those, you know, 100% projects, DNR funded projects in the region. But, you know, that's good information that, you know, we need to make sure our contracting community is aware of. Right now, they would sign up through a business portal via Washington State. So it's a separate notification process than probably the federal contracting. But that would be a good thing to make sure that those contractors are aware that that's out there, and they can make sure to be watching for those contracts, you know, and they may be able to jump on a DNR contract and bid a really competitive price because they know they've secured work on the Forest Service side.
I guess we can leave it for the closing words from our panel, from our last virtual field trip of the day. So Corinne, Chris, or Nolan?
Yeah.
You guys have any final thoughts you want to share with the group?
Like I said before, I just thanks Andy for pulling this together and letting us be a part of it. From my perspective, it was just been a really good conference. I've learned a ton all the way through. So thank you. Thanks for all the participants and people listening through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just echo what Nolan said. This has been really great. Great to be part of this conference and part of the Society of American Foresters. And I'm just really happy to be here. So thank you for that.
Good. We'll see you at our next meeting.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the lunch field tour. I think that was kind of a cool thing to do. And just the other panels, I think, were very educational to everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being part of it. You know, I know you guys worked incredibly hard to pull your information together in a very short amount of time. And so I'm very grateful for what you've contributed for SAF. So thank you. Okay. Well, that concludes all of the presentations and field trip. And so I will see you at the awards. And if you're not an SAF member, still love to have you there. Awards are always fun. So I guess we can all log off now and meet back up in the meeting room at 3 p.m. So thank you.